Hello, all you crazy, toxic, and sweet humanoids dwelling on this celestial rock. Now, to be clear, whenever I say sweet and toxic, I don't mean all you sweet people and all you toxic people. I mean all the people. We're all sweet and toxic. We've all got good and bad. So, I'm an author. My name is Stevie Rose. Please buy my books. But I've decided that one of the things that I would love to do in my life is just start inserting myself in conversations where I have no earthly business being in. That seems like fun. So I've decided to make a video response, because I used to do those for Nerdfighteria. So a video response to Dr. Ramani's video. It was like a couple weeks ago, so I'm a little bit late, but still a lot better than like 2 years ago. On, I forget the title of it, but is throwing things a toxic trait? I have no expertise in this area. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not anybody that has studied this extensively. I mean, I have, like, in my own right in the last year, not professionally, not in any way that's, you know, recognized in society, right? But I do have a lot of experience with these relationships, so I think I understand it fairly well. So I would like to take all of this experience that serves nothing and has really just stalled my life and put it to good use. You know, making videos and trying to come up with a collective understanding of what is going on in the world. So so the main question for the video that I'm responding to is throwing things, like when you're angry and you throw things, not just like, here, catch. Is throwing things a toxic trait? Now, a lot of people, and from what I gather from the video, Dr. Ramani included, might have no idea what it's actually like to be that angry, and a lot of people have never had that level of anger in their life, and that's fine. Most people should not have that level of anger in their life. That is a very terrifying level of anger to have to deal with from other people. But when you deal with it from other people routinely for, I think it's like around 10 years if you're an adult, and just in your formative years as a kid, if that's how you were raised, that's what you're gonna learn. So it really bothered me that the video was essentially coming from a perspective of someone that isn't angry, because a lot of people aren't angry and that's fine, but wasn't really looking at it. So because Dr. Ramani is like a big public figure in the discussion on narcissism, and because of that, I would assume that there would be a better understanding, like a better intellectual understanding, even if it's not something that she can relate to, of how angry these relationships can make non-narcissistic people. So one of the things that I've come to realize is that, like I said, when you're in an adult relationship for, I think it's over 10 years, probably like give or take. Some people it's a little bit less, some people a little bit more, or in a narcissistic relationship as a child, then you tend to actually internalize these traits and you can copy them. So I've come to the conclusion in my own life that I have these specific narcissistic traits and I have to work through them. And that's more akin to narcissistic personality disorder than it is to actual narcissism as personality style, because the disorder it's not supposed to be like this. This isn't how I want to be. Whereas the personality style is, this is just who I am. Deal with it. Right? So I've got a little bit of that, I'd say. Not like the actual, I've never been diagnosed with it or anything, and I don't think that I have enough traits to actually qualify, but I'm working through some major things right now, and one of them is that level of anger. And I'm not the only one that I know who has that level of anger that I would not consider a narcissist. So I don't think that that was really a fair video to have put out for I don't like the term survivors. I don't like the term victims. I've been saying endurers people who've endured narcissistic relationships. So because a lot of endurers struggle with anger in their own right, it's one of the main components. It's anxiety and anger, both of which I got. Okay, but because a lot of endurers suffer from their own anger and their own shame rage cycle, because once you get that angry, that triggers a certain level of shame, and then that can make it its own cycle, or you can break the cycle. Like, a lot of people will obviously try and break the cycle. So my entire point in doing a response to this is I don't believe that it's a red flag, and I wanted to disagree with that, because I do believe it's a toxic trait. I don't care how angry you are. If you are that level of angry that you're throwing something, that's a toxic trait. You should definitely work on it. You know, anger management, that kind of things. However, it being a toxic trait is not synonymous with it being a red flag, because there are a lot of people who are not narcissistic who have this trait. And like just a normal example of like me in the workplace was I don't think that I was a narcissist in the workplace. I don't think I was particularly like, I'm absolutely not vindictive or manipulative, but I don't think I was particularly like difficult to work with, but I absolutely had anger issues, and I knew that if I was in that energy, I was making the people around me uncomfortable, and I didn't like that. However, when I get off, I worked as answering service, so it's kind of like customer service, but for after hours. So when I get off the call, like a particularly frustrating call, and I kept my cool the whole call. I was really good at de-escalating clients. That was like my forte. And once I get off the call, I would honestly take my headset off and just whip it at the computer. And I'd be like, fucking done today. Like, and I knew it made people around me uncomfortable. There was 2 people specifically that I knew it made them really uncomfortable. But I couldn't help it. And not to say I could not help it. It was like, yes, it was a problem and it was a toxic trait. But it came out in me whipping my headset at my computer rather than me making the call worse, escalating the client, making a mountain out of a molehill. Or even in some cases, they were really legitimately awful calls. And it's like, I just want to yell at you, but I'm not going to. And because I was able to restrain myself in that way, then it ended up coming out in other ways. And I know a lot of people that, like, in relationships, they'll throw things and they don't like that they did it. And in most cases, that happens mostly in narcissistic relationships. That's another reason why that bothered me so much. Because I was watching a scene from Breaking Bad. I'm going to be doing a video on Walt's narcissism, like all of it, deep dive. But that might take me a few months. But there was a scene where Jesse was really, really upset. Oh my god, yeah, about the money and whatever. And Walt calls Jane his junkie girlfriend. And like Jesse went from like being a relatively calm and composed to just like, and threw something at him. And anybody who's been in a narcissistic relationship can like relate to that moment where it's like, you're baiting me, you're trying to get me to, you know, take the bait and just lose my mind, so then you can point at me and be like, yeah, you're so crazy. So again, the fact that it was in a video that was like, yes, this is always like a more or less a red flag, really bothers me, because again, these people, like endurers of narcissistic relationships, are called crazy by almost everybody that they try and talk to about it. So suggesting that the person throwing things is the one who's in the wrong every single time is incredibly short-sighted, because in a lot of these cases, the whole point is with narcissistic gaslighting and shame rage cycles is to aggravate the person that they're with and get them to instigate the violence, so that way they can back off and be like, see how crazy you are? You keep doing stuff like this. You keep throwing things every time I'm trying to have a conversation with you. What? Because I compared you to your mother, like stuff like that. And it's like, yes, exactly. You know that gets to me. We're supposed to be like trustworthy people. We're supposed to trust each other. We're not supposed to throw each other's vulnerabilities in each other's faces. You threw that in my face, I'm gonna throw a fucking face at you. But so to me, that in and of itself is not representative of narcissism or in any way indicative of a red flag. What I think is most important when it comes to having that trait, having that level of anger where you've thrown things in conversations or even just at work and it has nothing to do with being mad at anyone around you and the call's done and you're not mad at that person anymore, it's just frustrating and you throw something. I think that it all boils down to these three key like factors about whether or not it's a red flag level of toxic, because like I said, it is a toxic trait. It's not a good thing. But whether it's a red flag or whether it's proceed with caution, a yellow flag. So the first is accountability. Acknowledging when something hurts someone or makes someone uncomfortable. Like I said, I knew that it was making the people around me uncomfortable and I just couldn't fix it. I'd apologize to people that like I was close to. I'd talk with them and be like, I know how uncomfortable it makes this other person. I just can't fix it. And at the time I was 19. I wasn't really equipped to fix it yet. I'm still barely equipped to fix it, but it's finally happening. And the other important thing for accountability is to make amends where possible. So if there's like say you throw something and it breaks, fix it. Fix it before you even try apologizing. And if you can't fix it, then at least you tried. But make amends where you can. So that goes hand in hand with accountability and contrition, right? Then there's self-reflection. Because if you are that angry, it's great to apologize. It's great to realize like, yeah, okay, this isn't who I want to be. This isn't how I want to behave. And I'm going to take accountability for my actions. I'm going to be responsible for my own actions. That's all great. But if you can't actually fix it, then it's just going to keep happening. So the way to fix it is a certain degree of self-reflection, which would be, figure out where the anger comes from and what it's really aimed at. And this one's long. So yeah, that's important. It's like not necessarily why I'm angry in this moment. Why am I so angry and why does this keep happening where this is how it comes out, right? And anger is an emotion and important, like all emotions. So if we have it, finding the reason could help direct it. And right here, I would like to note the difference between a reason and an excuse. I was taught that in high school, and I've really held on to that my whole life. I think that it's really important to distinguish the two. An excuse is something that you're just using to get out of something. You know, like, I'm angry. Oh, it's because I was raised like that. Okay, well, I guess that's all I can do. All right, I'm angry. The reason is because I was raised like that. Now what can I do about it, right? There's a huge contrast there. And again, a difference between a mistake and a pattern too. So a mistake is whenever you mess up and you take accountability for it and you self-reflect and it's a mistake. But a pattern, you will never see any of this. Like, you might see a pattern of people taking accountability, apologizing, and then doing the same thing again, and like that cycle. But if you're actually not seeing any deep level of improvement, then they're not really trying. They're just, it's a superficial thing. I've seen that. But, so the point isn't that anger is bad. A lot of people feel angry, and a lot of people feel rightfully angry. Anger is a really, really good thing. It's an emotion. Like all of our emotions, it's good. It's got a purpose. The problem lies where we don't have healthy outlets for directing it, and that would be the third thing. So there's accountability, self-reflection, and finding a healthy outlet for your anger, especially if you're angry a lot. Like if it's just something that comes up every now and then, you might not need a healthy outlet. It might just be those first two that really seal the deal and get everything done, and okay, you're not an angry person anymore. But for that pattern of anger, and the level of anger that comes from being somebody that, you know, throws their headset at the computer, finding a healthy outlet is incredibly important. So to me, the main two that I've found in my life are art. So many different forms of art, like painting, music, writing, whatever, any form of artistic expression. When you're angry, that can actually help a lot. Like a lot. Like whenever I write, I go, or whenever I'm angry, sometimes I can just go write and get it all out, and it feels infinitely better, and I didn't have to like go punch something. But that brings me to the second healthy outlet for anger, is physical activity. So obviously there's things like learning how to fight, which is one of the things that I did, but even just doing regular exercises, jumping jacks, sit-ups, like regular exercise can help get the anger out. And then there's things like just running, and well, okay, that's regular exercise, but I'm still just thinking of fighting. Like when you're really mad and you just go punch a punching bag, it does work. And if you learn fighting, like actual learning how to fight and learning the techniques and stuff, then you also learn a bit of self-discipline. Self-discipline can really help keep the anger in check in times when it's most important. And then you'll notice other people might never ever notice progress on this, and that's fine. But if you are one of the people with anger, you know, like me, you'll notice your own progress whenever it comes time, like a moment where maybe just a month ago you would have screamed your head off, and like now you're just kind of like, okay, deep breath, why am I really upset, how can I fix this situation? And in that moment is when the true growth happens. It's not anything like this, it's not reflecting on it, it's not intellectualizing it, it's in that moment where you're angry and you want to throw something but you don't, that the growth happens. And nobody will know that that's like, you don't go like, hey, I wanted to throw something but I didn't. Right? Most people just wouldn't do that. And that's fair. But in that moment, that's when true growth and true change happens, and that's possible for a lot of people. And like I said, that would mean that inherently throwing things is not a red flag. Like I said, a yellow flag, proceed with caution. It's not a red flag to abusive behavior, because generally speaking, a lot of non-abusive people are that angry, and a lot of non-abusive people have terrible coping mechanisms and were taught really, really awful emotional regulation by the abusive people, more or less. So, and for art and physical activity, that would be things that are safe, things that are smart, and things that can be picked up at a moment's notice. So, you know, if your outlet for anger is like you have to go throw plates, and you've got this plate throwing place, but you have to like drive and it's 45 minutes away, and like and you have to book an appointment and you have to pay money, that's not going to help you. What would help would be like, okay, I'm going to set up a punching bag over there, and anytime that I feel angry, I'm going to go hit it. And then you're at your home space, you can go in a moment's notice, and right? So there are ways of doing it that are smart. That's what I meant by smart. So all in all, I think I articulated my point fairly well. I thought that this was an important video to make because, like I said, a lot of endurers of narcissistic relationships find themselves with that level of anger, and I kind of find it incredibly short-sighted that somebody with such knowledge on narcissism and victims, and who is really doing an amazing job in raising awareness to this and invalidating victims, not invalidating victims, and you know, in helping the world to see that these people aren't crazy. This was an actual thing that happened. For someone like that to turn around and say, just without thinking, because they don't have this level of anger, that throwing things is a red flag and it's always a like proceed with caution kind of thing. Like I said, it is a proceed with caution, but the way that she said it isn't quite as devil's advocate as I'm saying it right now. It was very much like, I got frustrated and threw a pen by myself, and I'm just sitting there going like, if I got frustrated and threw a pen, I would be so proud of myself. Like, if that was the level, and I know how angry that somebody who's not an angry person must have felt for that to have happened. But for somebody who is an angry person to try and imagine that level of restraint, where you're going like, it's not even restraint, that's just like, that's the most that I could do, and then I felt better. I'm just, wow, that's gotta be some kind of life. and not in a bad way, like, that's got to be amazing to not have that level of anger. I'm an angry person, and I know a lot of angry people, and I know that it's one of the biggest, like, traits that are carried on from people who have endured narcissism for a long time. So I just wanted to make a video and explain that. And I figured that might be a good start to me doing stuff like this, like just insinuating myself in conversations where I have no earthly business being. I love it. It's great. I want to keep doing it. So yeah, there is something else I wanted to say, but I forget, and I don't want to close off the video before I remember this. Well, one thing that I'm reading this book right now, which is Kids Are Worth It, Giving Your Child the Gift of Inner Discipline, and I absolutely love it. In terms of what I'm talking about here in this book outlines, or Barbara Coloroso outlines 3 different types of family structures. One is the brick wall family. That's like, my house, my rules, no, you know, you do what I say, all of that. The next is the jellyfish family, and that's more or less like flimsy, kind of can't stand up for themselves, doesn't have a spine, doesn't have, well, jellyfish doesn't have vertebrae, whatever. And the last one is the backbone family. And the jellyfish family has 2 subcomponents. It's one is somebody who does not want to be like the brick wall family, but can't keep putting up this front of being like overly there for the kid instead of being overly absent, like in a brick wall family. So like being overly supportive, and not necessarily that it's a front, but it's just, it's emotionally exhausting to keep doing that. So then they end up screaming and reverting back to the brick wall family, which is what they grew up with in most cases. So that's really interesting. And then the second type of jellyfish family is like more or less neglectful. Like I'm gonna just take care of myself and you do you, and that raises kids to be like not assertive and not really know who they are because they had more or less an absent parent. And then the backbone family, which is what we'd all strive for, which is to raise kids to stand on their own and to have backbones. And I think that whenever it comes to all of this mixed in with this, the more I think about it, I think jellyfish families are what we see a lot of right now, and that's it would be such an explanation that makes sense for why kids have become more obnoxious and less accountable, less responsible. And I'm not saying that that's universally true or anything, but just it is, like, not universally true, but it is a truth where it's becoming more and more normal. So I think that that's, there's a lot of jellyfish families right now, and when it comes to anger, jellyfish families are, they're the parents that, you know, like, oh, I'll do everything for my kid, and then everything will be set for the kid, and the kid only has to focus on, like, being alive and being okay. And it seems all fair in theory, but then whenever you exhaust yourself, then you go like, "Okay, why aren't you listening to me?" And you scream it, and that anger comes out. And that's the brick wall family coming out, so to link it all back to this. But in terms of anger and narcissism, that's not a narcissistic person. That's somebody who really is trying to do what's best for their kid. I mean, it could be a narcissistic person that's just trying to, like, okay, I know that this is how I wanted to be raised, so I'm going to raise my kid like this, and I don't care how my kid wants to be raised, and I just want the world to see that I'm doing a good job raising my kid. I'm a good parent. Like, that's a way that it could be, but I think in most cases, a jellyfish parent is somebody who is trying to do better than what they were raised with, which is more than likely narcissism, and they don't know how because they haven't been raised like that. They haven't been around situations that are healthy, and to go from unhealthy situations to healthy situations without having like some kind of roadmap is incredibly difficult. So the more that I think about jellyfish families in terms of anger, the more I think, again, these aren't narcissistic people. These are people that are really struggling to do better and just don't know how. And they can have that level of anger where they throw things and they're just angry, and And again, it's not that it's not toxic. It's not a red flag, because there's a lot of people that have really deep-seated rage issues and reasons behind them. And you can see that they're working through them, and you can see that they regret doing something. The last thing that I threw in a relationship was 4 years ago, and I'd thrown things in the same relationship before, and I didn't like that, but I like, okay, it's fine, you know, it's how I was raised. I'm not gonna, like, yeah, whatever, I'm not crazy. That's just how things are in this house, right? But then I ended up throwing something that meant a lot, like a lot, to the person that it belonged to. And I felt so bad. Like I said, make amends. I tried to put it back together. I couldn't. I tried to replace it. I didn't know where to, and I didn't have the money. And all in all, that incident made me realize, like, okay, I don't care how mad I am, I will find something else. Like, I will, a thing that I've done is hit a wall, right? Which, again, not good, but better than breaking something that means the world to somebody that means the world to you. So, yeah. And I was gonna go on another rant there, but I think that this is enough of a video for me to conclude. Like, I don't think that she was wrong. It's definitely a toxic trait, and it's something that if you see, and if you see it and like it's aimed at you, or if it's around you, like not just you're hearing it, and it makes you uncomfortable, it makes you feel unsafe, and you tell that person and they belittle you and they treat you badly for it, that's a red flag. But if you tell that person and they go like, you know, like I just said, like, it's how I was raised, I don't know, like, I don't know any different, right? Whenever I was like 20, if I'd thrown something, I probably would have had the red flag reaction. But by around 23, 24, not so much anymore. So these things, and again, I was healing and I was learning and figuring out how to be a healthy person, right? So all of these things like come together to show that this action in and of itself is not the red flag. It's all the behavior that accompanies it. All of the patterns that you see. If this is someone that you barely know and is throwing things and you don't know, like, okay, should I keep getting to know this person or should I back off? That's more or less a question of what you can handle. If you're not an angry person and you can't handle a lot of anger, then no, you probably can't handle being around that person, because that's probably not their angriest trait. All right? But if you're a person that's comfortable with anger, comfortable with your own anger and being around it, as long as it's not directed at you, this person doesn't break trust, this person isn't vindictive and manipulative, that's kind of more or less how I am. I can be around really angry people and not have it affect me, but it needs to have like those criteria. It needs to be somebody that I trust, somebody that I know, like, even in the worst anger, they won't turn around and throw something at me. They won't. And not necessarily that, oh, just because it's not being thrown at me, it's not bad. Like I just said, I know what level of anger that I'm comfortable being around. If you are uncomfortable being around that level of anger, then do not be around it. Doesn't matter what anybody has to say. Doesn't matter if that person's a narcissist or not. It's about, not to sound like a fucking narcissist, but it's about feeling safe and feeling secure. And if you can't feel secure around somebody, then just don't be around them. And especially if you're somebody that has been through all of this and you're looking for red flags because you're scared of being in that situation again, then, and you don't have to explain this to people. You don't have to be like, you threw something that one time and it made me really uncomfortable. If you feel like you can explain that, then go for it. And if you feel like you can't, you don't owe anyone an explanation for anything unless you hurt them. But whenever it comes to protecting your own boundaries, which admittedly can hurt someone, but when it comes to just protecting your own space, you do not owe people explanations. You can back away from someone and not explain it and just be like, yeah, it's something that happened. I'm really sorry, you know, if ever you see them again. But it's another thing that Dr. Ramani said. Like, when you're getting out of these things, people tend to put walls up. put up as many walls as you want, put up as many as you need in order to feel safe, and then you can